Arif Noorani is from the CBC in Canada, Canada's finest, and you work in their podcasting department. Relatively new department within the CBC, or?
Yeah, we launched it 7 years ago, and the wave of the kind of podcast renaissance. And so in the last 7 years, we've developed about 70 different series, a lot of them limited run, some ongoing. And at any given time, we have 25 podcasts releasing or in production in a kind of range of genres.
Now, the CBC is the public service broadcaster of Canada, the biggest network in Canada. What is the importance they put in podcasts as opposed to linear FM broadcasting? Do they see them now as equally as important? Do they still say this is still the priority FM, or how do you feel?
Yeah, I think it's seen as really important, and it's one of the fastest growing areas of the CBC. And the reason is it's an opportunity to tap into younger audiences. And by younger, we mean 20 to 50 years old, because the terrestrial services around the world generally, but in Canada as well, have older listeners. So podcasting is a big part of the strategy to be relevant to more people. So it is important, and we've had big success. Like not just in Canada, we are the number one publisher in the country, but internationally. Like one of our mandates is taking Canada and our creators and content to the world stage. So we flex really well in the US and the UK and Australia, Scandinavian countries. So we have this sort of global footprint. And I think we have been seen as a success, but our job is to continue that success and keep growing. And so that's why, we come to conferences like this and present and make connections. So.
Now, before we came on, we were just talking a show you used to work on, phenomenally successful, Q. But it was I know it was a podcast version too, but it was a radio show first and a hugely syndicated one.
That's right.
So your most popular podcasts that you've been worked on over the years, do you find that they have been radio first and then turned into podcasts? Or are these purely 100% formatted for podcasts first?
Yeah, well, I would say back then, that was, 12 years ago, it was mostly radio shows that were the most popular. And with that show, we also created a TV version. Yes. We syndicated in the US.
Cue the music.
Cue the music. We also were on the cusp of a TV production deal to syndicate our series. But I would say in the last 7 to 10 years, audiences want original podcasts that think about them first. So our biggest series, well, we only now work in originals. So it's narrative storytelling and true crime is our biggest bucket. But we've also had great success with memoirs, like podcasts. Memoirs, we had one of the first ones, 7 years ago called Alone, a Love Story, and we do more of that. Personal storytelling that's highly produced is really popular. So on any given year, we have about 70 million downloads for our originals, which, rivals what all our radio shows have too. So they're complementary, but we love working in the kind of original podcast first space because that's where there's just a huge audience opportunity. So.
Are the podcasts taken and put on air as well?
Yeah, we do that. We don't put all of them on air. We're selective because when you listen to the radio, it is a general audience. So someone's stumbling on what you do. So if you do something that's hyper niche or hyper experimental, or it's like aimed at a really particular demo, that's not going to work on a kind of broadcast. But on our summer schedule, which is coming up in June, runs for 10 weeks. We have 14 of our shows.
The bosses are off there. Throw it all on.
Yes.
Put it all on.
We have to lobby and because they look at our ratings. Yes. But we have 14 of our series that are going to be on the radio schedule. So everything from the narrative true crime to the standalone comedy shows. So we're really integrated in that. But we look at the audience numbers on radio. You don't want to put something on that brings down the numbers. So we work collaboratively with our radio strategy group. Okay. And the reason we do that too is to amortize the cost. If you're spending all this money on originals, we can say, hey, we're helping you fill the radio schedule as well.
Of course, It's free content for them within the CBC family.
Yeah.
Finally, your talk was about developing new shows and formats and so on and so forth. You mentioned their true crime, which I've heard so many people say because it's popular all over the world. Yeah. How much of when you were picking and formulating new shows, are you looking to see, well, let's just follow the trend of what's popular elsewhere, or let's take a bet and a chance on this way out there idea, put our resources and the money where our mouth is and see how it goes?
Yeah, great question. I think we try
Thank you.
Yes, we do both. So my strategy is create some big tent hits that have tens of millions of audiences, and often that ends up being narrative true crime, although we do it very there's, you know, editorial reasons to do the story, like it's really strong. And then when you have those big tents, then you can experiment and push different genres with other titles where it's not as important. You know, the numbers aren't the only thing, but you're creating new formats.
You're testing the waters.
Yeah, and we're trying something new and bold and innovative. So we do both. We feel the big tent allows us to have many small tents, and that's kind of our philosophy, because we want to be pushing the boundaries and creating the next, breakout hit that it gets people to turn their heads.
Yeah.
And so we try to do both and balance it.
Finally, you meet a young person who's 27 and they say to you, true crime, I love true crime.
Yeah.
Why should I listen to a podcast when I can watch brilliant, beautifully shot and produced true crime on Netflix?
Yeah, I would say do both, right? Like at Netflix, it's scripted crime. It's most of the crime series on Netflix are like dramatized, right? But I do both. I'm a big fan of the genre. And then what true crime though allows you is you get really intimate and into that space, and you get access in a way that you don't with TV, and it's real stories. Like in podcasting, it's all real life people. And I would say the excellence around true crime in the podcast space is there's so many amazing series, like In the Dark and Serial, as we know, and our stuff. We're really proud of how well produced it is, and so I think you do both. If you like one, you're gonna love the other, and we all have room in our appetite, in our kind of listening and watching appetite to consume a range of content.
Best of luck with everything in the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation.